Welcome to Spirit, Purpose, and Energy. I'm JJ Filzanes, your host, and thank you for downloading today's episode. We have a very interesting episode today. Today we're going to talk about a popular, it's not a religion, belief system, practice that Madonna and who else? I feel like a bunch of celebrities years ago made very popular, and it brought it to my awareness at the time. Not the celebrities, but other people who were wearing red strings. If that is not something that you were familiar with, because maybe it didn't happen as much outside of Los Angeles as it did inside of Los Angeles, the red string, then just listen up today for the lessons that you can learn or grab or things that might be of interest to you to utilize in your life. So it's commonly called Kabbalah, but it is more appropriately Kabbalah. And it's an ancient wisdom that empowers us to improve our lives, discover our purpose, and achieve the lasting fulfillment we are meant to receive. And this topic was brought to me by Devin Galladay, and Devin does so many things. Devin is a Gemini, and I want to put that out there for those of you that know what that means. Geminis and most air signs love thinking, love concepts and ideas and thoughts. And so we go places with this, and I hope that you can keep up because it makes a full circle, which is super exciting. And it's me just trying to understand and learn what we can take from this wisdom and how some of us can actually use it. Devin Galladay is the editor and publisher of the In the Know Traveler series of websites, which celebrated 15 years in August of last year. He also publishes several other travel-inspired websites, including In the Know Bride, which chronicles his endeavor to marry his wife in 100 countries around the world. They've married 20 times in 15 countries so far, and his wife is a friend of mine, and you may know her, Morgana Ray, and she'll be on very soon. Devin has written for the Huffington Post, The Good Men Project, The Citron Review, Travel Age West, and Turkish Airlines Skylife magazine. Devin holds an MFA in creative nonfiction from the Antioch University at Los Angeles, and he's also a frequently sought-after guest on relationship and travel. He's appeared on Fox TV, NBC, Reinvention Radio, The Jewish Journal, and hundreds of podcasts. And he lives in Los Angeles with his wife, Morgana. Welcome to the show, Devin.
Thank you for having me, JJ.
So you are one of the most eclectic people I've met, and I love you for that because I know you're Gemini, and I know you have your hands and your energy in all different directions, which makes it really cool and fun to have somebody like you as a guest on the show, because I know we can weave in all different kinds of fun things. But one of the things that attracted me to having you on the show that I haven't talked about before was in a religious sense, in terms of spirit, purpose, and energy and the spirituality things that I talk about. I've done shows on, let's say, Buddhism, for instance, and how Buddhism can be used no matter what your religion, if you're religious or not, the difference between religiosity and spirituality. And one of the things that I know that you're more schooled in than I am is Kabbalah, or as you probably more accurately pronounce Kabbalah, but I think those of us that are unaware call it Kabbalah, and I've heard it in the media as Kabbalah. So I really would love you to educate me, and therefore my audience, on what Kabbalah is, any kind of history you can tell us. And I know that I've seen it talked about in a way that, to me, like Buddhism, sounds like a spiritual practice more than a religion that can be integrated into anyone's life. Is that accurate?
Oh, totally. I think, first off, it's a very big field, and I will try to keep all of its bigness to a minimum, because otherwise we could just be talking about history and competing views and things like that for a day, and I don't want to punish your audience with that. But, I think probably the easiest way to describe it is reading in between the lines of the Old Testament. In other words, Hebrew and Aramaic is not only sort of like a spoken word language, but it is also a number system. And so you can kind of almost say that there is in how words, because it's also a number system, all connect to each other. Like, as an example, perhaps the most rudimentary thing I can say is that the word for love and the word for unity also equal the number 13. And the divine name of God, the Tetragrammaton, equals 26. So you could kind of say in some way that love and unity mixed together equals God. Now, I'm not defining God, but these are the kinds of discoveries. It's really about finding things by looking really, really hard at them. In other words, we don't take things in just purely literal terms. We try to find the deeper meanings of things. And this is true of both traditional Kabbalah. And when I say traditional Kabbalah, I'm really talking about sort of like the Judaism side of things. And for the people who couldn't care less about the Judaism side of things, then it would be sort of, shall we say more, occult Kabbalah, which is really more about how do we find personal revelation, ecstatic experiences, things like that.
So many questions. I had a client who was from the Jewish faith. I don't know that she ever practiced. She was very spiritual, very clairvoyant and intuitive. And she had given me a bunch of gifts, one of which was a deck of cards. And I don't even know if I still have it because I didn't know what to do with it. And now I'm remembering a little bit of this conversation when you mentioned about love and unity and God. And I remember seeing these symbols and I didn't understand it. So I didn't know what to do with the cards. And in terms of the occult Kabbalah, knowing that there was like the red string and people were giving people red strings so can we talk about some of those things that a lot of people have heard of, but have no idea why anyone was doing it or why I would care, or if is it a real thing? Is it an offshoot of something that we wanted to bring into more mainstream?
Well, I think the red string was the attempt to bring all of this into the mainstream. Actually, the red string comes from a group called the Kabbalah Center that focuses on Lurianic Kabbalah. Again, not going to bore you with the bigness of what that all means, but basically that's more traditional Kabbalah. In other words, it's the Kabbalah that wants you to be a better Jew. And there's no downside to it particularly, but it would be much more like we're going to take these bits and pieces that we understand from reading between the lines of the Bible in order to prosper as a Jewish person. Like, it answers a lot of the why kinds of questions. Just to specifically answer the red string is that they take that red yarn, the red being sort of like the lowest energy, wrapping it about the grave of Rachel. I can't remember precisely her significant importance with the red string, but they wrap it around that grave in order to kind of take her very, very positive energy to destroy negativity in your life. So that's what they were selling it as. I can only say that you could probably just take 5 minutes and go, okay, I'm going to really be positive now. I'm going to consciously act towards my own best interest rather than sitting at home and worrying about the 500 things that I don't have control over. Ultimately, Kabbalah is sort of about the notion of how can I transform my mundane life into something that is spiritual and divine.
Okay, now we're talking. How can I transform my life into something more spiritual? And what did you say?
Closer to the divine.
Mm-hmm. And is that is definitely, because I remember, Madonna, like it's that time where, the red string became really popular. For those of you that don't remember that, I don't know how long ago that was. Maybe it was 10 years ago or more, where everybody, at least in Los Angeles, and it was wearing a red string around their wrist. And while I understand the symbolic aspect may be a far cry from, let's say, the traditional Kabbalah, the intention, besides sort of mainstream awareness, the intentions feel good. That's why people were doing it, right? So you said, instead of wearing a red string, just sit and think about all the things that you can release and not feel responsible for. But the act of doing something like that, the act of wearing it as a reminder, as an anchor, as a neurolinguistic idea and anchor to choosing a higher spiritual thought or purpose in the moment, to me is what I wanted to have this conversation. Because like in Buddhism, I know that in the church that I grew up in, my mother's friend was starting to teach yoga, and she wanted to teach yoga at the church. And there was some conversation we had in the car about that the our priest, who's super cool, needed to get permission from like the archdiocese, from the bishops high up, to basically have yoga at the church, because yoga was based in Buddhism or something. And I'm like, wait a minute, this is ridiculous. Like, this is nothing. One has nothing to do with the other, but it was the whole religious. I'm like, oh, forget it. I just thought it was the most ridiculous thing, because I've done these shows on, you can be any religion and still practice what I think Buddhism is. And I know that Kabbalah was the same. So here now we're going to move into that. It's that, how can I transform my life? So I love that what I'm feeling is that this energy of Kabbalah is, so if I think Buddhism is about centering and peacefulness and groundedness and again, releasing control in a way, I feel like Kabbalah sounds like it's about the expansion, and there's more motion, there's more movement, there's more transformation, there's more, like you said, reading between the lines. What do you think about that?
I think you are in the ballpark. I mean, the truth of the matter is we're talking about really abstract stuff. And it's one of those things that the more you define it, the more, who knows if we're right or wrong. But I think one of the important elements of it is that there is a measure of individuality to it. In other words, it's really sort of up to you to find your own meaning within this, meaning that in many religions, there is a hierarchy of sorts. There is a rabbi, there is a priest, there's somebody who's intended to be a middleman, for lack of a better description, between you and your highest self, or God, or the cosmic ooze, or whatever we want to call this thing. And Kabbalah gives you sort of like a system that you get to go explore that thing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So there is a system? What's the system?
Well, the system is, again, going back to the traditional form, which is like, okay, here's why we do these Jewish things to be a better Jew, and we're going to be closer connected to God. And then the more occult stuff is like, no, forget about that. Just kind of go for the ecstatic experience and do some searching. But either form, ultimately, I would say it has to do with your consciousness in the moment. Meaning that, let's say your natural inclination is to, like, I just do good things, help old ladies across the street. I want to hug and kiss my wife, because that's what good people do. Good people seek out these opportunities to do good things, and that's what I do. A Kabbalist would say, yeah, that's all well and good, but the idea here is not necessarily to be robotic. In other words, it's very easy for us to just get caught in routines and in ruts, and just, I wake up, I go to work, I do the thing that I always do, and then I come back home and my life feels empty. They would say that this emptiness is kind of like part of the relationship between us and, again, I'm going to use the word God. And so this relationship needs to be sort of actively sought out, because we're kind of, from a standpoint of just logistics, like I'm sitting over here, you're sitting over there, all of our friends and family and the rest of Earth are scattered all over the place. And what Kabbalah would ultimately teach us is that really we're all sort of one. We're all connected to each other in some way, even if it's a distant way, that we're all connected. And so for us to go through our lives in sort of this reactionary place, it's not necessarily helpful, even if we on an individual level can say, well, but I'm doing good things. I'm helping people. The idea here is that really the consciousness is released, or the positive vibes are released, when I'm actually being really conscious in the moment and making choices. Because maybe one day helping that lady across the street is a good thing, and maybe on another day it's actually not. Maybe we're getting in the way by just robotically doing things over and over again. Even if on an individual way, I can say, yeah, but I'm doing all these good things, and isn't that just inherently good? And a Kabbalist say, not necessarily. In other words, we don't plan too far in advance. We don't worry about just habitually doing things for the sake of habitually doing them. And in other words, we stop what we're doing, and it's like, is this what I should be doing in this moment? And some days it's going to be yes, and some days it's going to be no. But the point is that we want to break the roboticness or the reactionary part of our consciousness by limiting that, by saying, okay, I'm here right now in this circumstance. What's the best action for me to take?
Is Kabbalah basically like a new age form of Judaism?
No, it's actually been around at least to the 1100s in Girona, probably much older than that. I mean, really, the first stuff that we have, and there's some debate in terms of how old these documents are, but at least to the first century AD through something called the Sefer Yetzirah, which is a really very short document. And then probably the major time where there was a shift, where there was a real up level, was probably going back to who was that guy that I just mentioned, Isaac Luria. And he was a rabbi around the 1500s, maybe 1400s, that really kind of gave a very specific framework of things.
So why? Because it sounds obviously very centered in Judaism. Yes, it's rooted.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So how did it get into mainstream then that became like everybody's doing it, like the occult? Like where do you think the connection is there and where it moved to?
Well, I can only kind of guess, but I can give you some specific examples that may help. Is that Kabbalah has been around for hundreds, if not thousands of years. However, all of that information was either in Aramaic or Hebrew. And none of this stuff was translated until the 1940s. None of it. The occultists got a hold of it earlier because there was a guy named Athanasius Kircher from, I think it was like 1565, and he wrote a book called the Oedipus Egypticus, where he basically translated the Sefer Yetzirah into English, and he showed a model of the tree of life. Unfortunately, without pictures, it's hard to explain. But if you've even dabbled in this stuff, you've probably seen an image of the tree of life, which has 10 spheres on it and 22 connecting paths that connect the 10 spheres together. And it's sort of like up above is closer to the divine, and closer to the bottom is sort of like our earthly existence. And so Athanasius Kircher basically was not a Hebrew scholar. He was a Jesuit. The story goes that he was a next door neighbor to somebody who was a Jewish Kabbalist, and he studied hard, and he wrote up this version and put it in this book, and that was written in Latin. And so the occultists of the time did not know Hebrew or Aramaic, but they did know Latin. So this was something that they could translate and explore. And it started, I can't say that they did like a spot on job. I'm sure if there was a traditional Kabbalist here, they would be shaking their fist in the air, but they did a good job. And it was probably some of the best stuff that was available at the time. And again, we're talking about some real abstract material, but the occultists grabbed it because it was interesting and different and a fairly complete system of thought in dealing with what is our relationship with the divine. And that stuff just came around in I think in the 1700s. All of a sudden it was being translated into French and then later into English.
So where do you think it is useful for people to understand or utilize? Because I know I had friends who grew up, in fact, I don't even, in thinking back, I don't know what they grew up, if they grew up Catholic or Protestant, but all of a sudden people sort of flocking to the center here in Los Angeles and getting their red strings and finding peace, finding direction, finding inspiration. And that's when, I hadn't participated for no other reason, I don't think, other than convenience, because I'm very open to trying all kinds of things, but I know they weren't Jewish. So where are the lessons that we all can share there's lessons in every religion, doesn't matter if you're that religion or not, of course, right? Because there's a through line for a lot of them where you can pick out the pieces that are the same and the messages are similar. So where would you think most people would benefit from a different perspective that Kabbalah has that maybe other religions don't, for us to, utilize? From what you've already talked about, how can I, in terms of like the awareness, it sounds like the being in the moment and the not doing the routine thing. There's so many people that go to church and or are religious and they practice their things, but they're doing it like you said, like mechanically and like a robot, and they're not actually in the moment, and they're not actually tapping into anything bigger than themselves, or just doing the routine of going to church or doing their prayers or whatever, doing a nice thing for somebody, but they're actually disconnected from that act. So where do you think the lessons would be, or the advice you could give people on how they may use Kabbalah or the teachings of Kabbalah, or how was I supposed to use that card deck? And I don't even know if I still have it, but if I was to find it, well, how do I use that?
Yeah, I mean, the joy of the red string and the card decks and all of those other pieces are fun, and they're not really necessary per se. Again, you can have fun with it, but if I was to just say, hey, you've got a casual listener out there, they want to change their life for the better, I would say slow down, like just slow down. And I think frequently where the greatest changes can come from is when it feels really, really hard. And as an example, it may be as somebody knocks on the door and asks for money. And I'm certainly not suggesting that you just give all your money away because somebody knocked on the door. It's how you arrive at the conclusion to give or not give. And the idea being is that since the universe needs to be hidden, and ultimately the conversation is going to either lean towards, do I align myself with the divine, or even for, if you don't believe in God, your divine self, or you align with the things that I want? Because really Kabbalah is how do we give and how do we receive? How do we do these things? Is if I just give you everything that you want all the time, it can easily start leading into enabling. If I just practice being sort of like, hey, we're all about discipline here, I start becoming oppressive because I think I know it's better for you than you do. So the idea here is that each time that I'm participating with some kind of an exchange, whether it be an exchange of energy or whether it be an exchange of like just you and I talking during the course of a day, or I'm giving you a birthday present, it's me stopping to say, okay, I could give JJ flowers because I'm told women like flowers. And maybe you would get those flowers and go, wow, look at this. These are beautiful flowers from Devon. It also might be, I could spend a little bit extra time and really get to know what JJ is going to want and need, and something that might even fulfill her. That's where the extra effort is. Now, these are kind of very routine things to do, but there's also that part where the rubber meets the road, where everything inside of me is screaming to study all night long for the test. But really the question might be is, before you study for this test, is this really a test that you need to be passing? Is it the thing that you want to be doing with your life? And I think the idea here is the more present you are in any circumstance is going to yield bigger and better results. In other words, just because everybody says that you have a quick wit, that doesn't necessarily mean that you should be a lawyer or a stand-up comedian or what people have been telling you. It's about slowing down and listening to yourself in a deeper way. And it might include meditation. It might include some other, shall we say, almost ritualistic things. But at some point, it's how much clarity do you have with yourself? And slowing down is a great way to start that.
I love the richness of it and the sort of mindfulness aspects. It's not just about getting to like a meditative state. It's a integrative state of awareness. And I think that's what I am attracted to and wanted to understand more about. So if someone is feeling intrigued by this, what recommendations would you have for them on how to learn more, how to incorporate practices? Is there a book? Is there where would they go?
There's about 10 million books on this subject, and there are no shortages of them. There is a book by, and I wasn't quite prepared for this, so I believe it is by Rabbi David Cooper, and it's called God is a Verb, which is a great sort of beginning book on the subject. Then there is, and I'm going to kind of give you sort of a wacky title that would give you sort of an occultist perspective, and that is the Aleister Crowley Thoth deck, Understanding the Aleister Crowley Thoth deck by Lon Milo Duquette. And the Thoth deck is just tarot cards, but it is understanding it through some like very heavy duty occultist sensibility, which is really sort of a sense of path working. And when I say path working, I'm referring to sort of like that idea of climbing up the tree and becoming closer to God. Ultimately, like the tarot trumps are sort of the, shall we say, the system for ascension and getting closer to the divine through archetypes that you might see on the trump, like the Fool card and the Emperor and things like that.
All right. So you just looped in a whole nother love of mine, which is the tarot. So, and
Right.
I actually have the Aleister Crowley deck and the Aleister Crowley book that explains the deck. So tell me
Right.
again about what is this book is Understanding. Give me the whole title.
Understanding. I think it's, again, I don't have them in front of me. I have them upstairs.
Okay.
But that said, there's a writer named Lon Milo Duquette, who is sort of the kind of guy who would make arts and crafts fun over the most hardcore occultism. In other words, he makes it dead simple. And so, if you're familiar with the Thoth deck and you're familiar with that, the Thoth book by Aleister Crowley, it's a fairly accessible book, but it's still some fairly dense material. So Lon Milo Duquette makes it really simple. He simplifies all this stuff and he goes sort of card by card to kind of explain how this all works. And so when I was talking about the tree of life, when I talked about the 22 paths that ascend the tree, you will probably know that there are 22 cards that are of the trump card, the major arcana.
Yes.
So when we start talking about the kings, queens, princes, and princesses, we're actually talking about the four worlds that all relate to the tetragrammaton. In other words, the ultimate divine name of God. Then we will talk about our numbered cards, the aces through tens, which all relate to the 10 spheres that we see on the tree of life. So all of these things have sort of over time integrated with themselves, and the deck of tarot cards all of a sudden has a much more spiritual connection. And this is, again, we're talking about more of an occultist sensibility of like, okay, I may understand precisely how I need to spiritually ascend, but it might be fun to kind of consult a deck of cards to give me a little bit of a jump start.
I love that because I use all of that and those 22 cards that you're talking about. In fact, at my birthday this year, we did the numerology around which tarot card, which of the trump cards was my year. And I forget which, I'm in the year of partnership, but I can't remember what the card is. And when I looked back at the last year and what that meant, and I read that, and I had some people who said to me, yeah, we absolutely see that that's where you've been. And this gave me and this is what's happening this year. And they're like, yep. And that's what's going to happen next. And it's already happened. And anyway, so I think I love how this is tying in, because you're not going to tie in tarot cards with Buddhism. And so this is really, I love sort of the circle that we just made for that. And I know that I put you on the spot with the books. So I apologize about that. And I know that's why I wanted to ask you, because there are so many resources and people want to know, well, which one's best or which one should I go to? And based on the conversation you and I have had thus far, that's why I wanted your recommendation, not just of course someone could go look it up on Amazon, but you're going to be like, which one is the right one? And so the fact that I asked that brought us to this sort of loopy place of the Thoth deck, which now even excites me more because I've been meaning to pull some cards recently, and it's sitting in the bedroom and they haven't been used for like 2 weeks. So thank you for that kick in the pants, but also the validity, if you will, or the validation that is a part of another. It's not so woo woo. It's actually a practice or a embodiment of an idea that is supported in a sort of structure of Kabbalah, or in sort of this idea that looking between the lines and having information for how we're supposed to grow and what we're to do next more specifically versus general robotic behavior. So anyway, this has been extremely fascinating for me. I hope that everybody is learning. And I know I want to leave some more time though, because I want you, because you're so fascinating, and I want you to share with people more about what it is that you're doing in the world. Because I know you're not you're not running a Kabbalah center. So how,
No, no,
so
I'm not.
I know. And you're so well-versed and well-spoken in all this. So I want you to tell us more about who you are in the world, what your gifts and talents are, how you're utilizing your fabulous, amazing brain and making shifts in the world. So tell the audience what it is that you do.
Well, obviously I do a whole slew of things. One of them, I'm a member of the Temple of the Silver Star, which is kind of what this nerd math that I have been describing. It's sort of like bleeds in and blends into the woo-woo scene. And so I've been doing that for a number of years. And I think it's, all about, exploring the nature and power of my being. And I think that's one of the important things. And then being there to be of service to other people. That's sort of a general thing. One of the things that I do that is sort of fun is my wife and I are in the process of getting married 100 times in 100 countries. So far, we've been married 20 times in 15 countries. So we continue to march on with that. And then I have a memoir coming out, which it's kind of ironic. Can I tell you about it?
Absolutely.
So my father was and I mean this with love, was a liar, a thief, and a con man. And I would say for the first 25 years of my life, nailed it in trying to be just like him. Unfortunately, it's not a sustainable life, and it certainly doesn't give you any self-esteem. The long story short is that my father's seventh wife called me up to let me know that he'd passed, and that his final request was to go home to Cadiz, Spain, where he would be scattered. The problem is that he wasn't Spanish, probably never been to Spain, and I took him anyway. And then I promptly lost the ashes. And I think the story itself is like, it's a little bit about, sort of like the mayhem of a father and son relationship. And he was a nut. But I think it's also about how do you continue to love somebody, love a parent, even though they are traveling on a path that is really just a blueprint to run away from. And so the book is about, how you lose the ashes. And it's also about how do you love your father when you know that they're sort of a ne'er-do-well, for lack of a better description. And I think it's, in part crazy story and in part sort of writing my own Catcher in the Rye tale to some pimply-faced kid who is just like me, who's facing a similar event of, how do you love your parents and how do you rectify their shortcomings while attempting to aspire to be the person you intended to be.
Well, I honestly think it's a perfect tie-in to this conversation about what we started out today with, talking about Kabbalah as how can I transform my life to be more spiritual and closer to divine, right? Because that's basically what your journey is how do I overcome and transcend what most people would just use as a victim mentality, and how do I open my heart to love someone in a way that is bigger than me, and to let go of sort of those humanly things, right? I mean, would you not agree that we've kind of done a full circle now?
Yeah, no, it's honestly, I'm a product of all this stuff. That's the truth of the matter. Is I've spent a lot of time with my own self-exploration. And, part of it is coming to the terms of, I was not at my best in my mid-20s. I don't think many of us are. And then it was just became, how do I become the best Devin that I'm capable of being? And so I personally went along the pathworking side. I also went to the Kabbalah Center for a great number of years, and I love the teachings because there's beauty in it. And I think there's, to some degree, I think there is beauty in staring at anything really, really long and really, really hard. I think that's, what I mean? It's like, I remember a friend of mine talking, she had just come back from India, and she told a room full of us this story about how she got to know this guy while in India, and his whole path to nirvana, according to him, was to try to get stray cats to jump through a hoop. And everybody in the room sort of laughed. How absurd, how ridiculous. And I'm not saying it's my path, but there was a part of me, it's like, oh, right, I get it. If you just keep doing this thing in a mindful way over and over and over, you're going to start learning stuff about humanity and human nature and understanding of yourself. And I think there's important things to that. But I think it's even more crucial that we do it in the most mindful way possible, which, by the way, is, I'm sure you know, easier said than done.
Oh, absolutely. But it's that pulling, it's that calling to know that there's something more to do, and not to do, or else you will not be happy. It's just that I'm being called. There's something pulling me to grow and expand, and I'm listening to that calling, because I know that if I stay in the place that's sort of common, that's not the right place. I don't know how to say it another way. If I stay in the consciousness of where most people are, that my inner being knows that there is something more to that. There's something more for me to do on this planet. There's more for me to expand to. This can't be it. There's sort of a journey that I'm on, and I don't want to deny myself that journey. And there's a peace, I think, and a surrender to it. But then, like you said, it's not the easiest thing. So there's work to be had. And I think, us sort of spiritual explorers who intuitively know that there's more, just don't feel satisfied sitting sort of idle to say, well, this is it, and there's nothing else for me to do. Of course there is. There's things to learn and grow and experience and get to an ascended place of being able to overcome anything that we've experienced, to feel joy, bliss, peace, and connection to the divine and to ourselves.
Totally. Like, I think there was a period in time where it was just, I just wanted to be happy. And now I want to really be in purpose. I really want to be in a place where I am getting what it is that I'm supposed to be here for. And when I'm closer to that thing, I feel good. I mean, I think in sort of a real generic way that service is a great place to start. And that's, I guess I'm throwing that out there is sort of, in other words, if I can do something for you where I'm not, intrinsically, secretly thinking, oh, what can I get out of this by doing it? Or I want a big pat on the back, I want an attaboy, then I'm kind of missing the boat. I think there is love, and that is where I make an action of service out of doing things for others without the expectation of something being given to me in return, rather than secretly wanting something in return, which really makes love a negotiation. So it's kind of it's a tricky path for sure. But it's one of those things, as you said, like it was a calling. It was, I had reached points in my life where I was so miserable, and this is obviously a much bigger conversation. I felt that I had no other choice but to kind of really start taking responsibility for my own life, good, bad, and different.
Yeah. And I'm all about that. In fact, thinking about your explanation of giving love, when I started my podcast, the Fit to Love podcast, and it was 6 days a week, and I had the Freedom Friday was about spirituality and law of attraction and numerology and all this kind of stuff, right? This was my sort of indulgence. This was for myself. I didn't do it for anybody else. And I thought, hey, if no one else listens, that's totally fine. I'm actually doing this for me. And then when I repurposed everything and I put it out there first as spirit, purpose, and energy, I really had no expectation of it working. I really was like, I don't know, I'm not an expert in law of attraction, but all of a sudden it's been the strongest tribe I have, and people are craving that. And I think that it's answering the question to what you and I are talking about, and what there are other people there in the world who have this calling and they're not sure where to find the answers. And so this is why I keep bringing people like you on, and who have the same similar exploration and expansion desires. And it doesn't have to be for any other reason than for peace of mind and for excitement and creativity. And if it produces money and success and connection and anything else, that's awesome. But it's coming from a different place, and it's wrapping it all together. So I know that you have your book, and I know you've got, I see you do shows on Facebook and Facebook Live. So why don't you tell people where to learn more about you, to get your book, to work with you in any capacity, to just be involved with you in more ways?
Oh, yeah, no, you can find me at devingallaudet.com, which is Devin, Gallaudet, Galaudet. Yes, it's got that bizarre French pronunciation. And I have all kinds of things that I talk about there, everything from sort of like Kabbalah and the Western Mysteries to my book, which, matter of fact, I'm going to be giving away a lot of cool, fun things. It is, life is crazy. There's just this reality that's been setting in because my book is going to the printer either today or tomorrow. So that means all this stuff is happening immediately. It's just amazing that when you start following sort of your higher self, the directions that you end up going. Because really, I thought my life was over when I realized I wasn't going to be the first baseman for the Los Angeles Dodgers. Like, if I couldn't do that, then what would I become?
That's hilarious.
And then all of a sudden you get this whole life of things that start showing up in the most unusual and perfect of ways. Everything from, the career that I'm in to even finding my wife, which is crazy. But there we are.
I know. One day I'm going to be adding a second episode here shortly too. And we probably, by the time this airs, are already having our second episode for women, men, and relationships, because I have a new co-host for that second episode. And I think it'd be really fun to get you guys on maybe the four of us on a show together. That would have to be a Zoom call, and it would definitely be video and audio because we'd have to see each other. But I think that would be a super fun, we have to do that, a super fun episode to have about your 100 marriages or 100 weddings in different places. So please check out Devin's website. Why don't you spell it again for everybody?
DevinGallaudet.com.
Okay. Check out Devin's website for more information about him. Get in touch with him about his book. And you're just a fascinating person. So I appreciate that you were able to help educate me and the audience on Kabbalah and how we could use it and its connection to the Tarot, which makes me really happy and excited. and just to be an example, both on a masculine side and just a human side of wanting to take this human experience into a more spiritually and divine connected way, because I think that's where we're all really craving our lives to go, regardless if we know it or not. We're looking for that stability, and that stability is not outside of us. Well, kind of is. It's sort of inside of us and connected outside of us, right? It's both. It's definitely not in things, and it's definitely not necessarily in other people per se. But I appreciate your time today and being on the show.
JJ, thank you so much for the opportunity and for such a fun conversation.